Hello everyone, this is update for September 17, 2023, day 571 of the war and of the date update. Also catch up for September 16 and 15. I'm gonna do quickly kind of review the economic developments around the world, or basically strategic developments. And then we're going to switch to the situation on the battlefield. I'm going to discuss a little bit more about the casualties or losses on both sides, and there were discussion. There was some information was revealed in Ukraine, and I just want to discuss it, clarify that, and also talk a little bit about the sort of nature of the war, what military equipment works and what doesn't really work. But first, let's just start with this macroeconomic overview, what's going on. We're going to start, as you can see, with Europe. So as you can see, the inflation is actually picking up in France, and for that reason, probably one of the reasons, European Central Bank increased interest rates, I think, to 4.5 or 4.75. And the way it goes, it will have to increase quite a bit more, which eventually will push Europe into very noticeable recession slash depression. Right now, we just kind of, I would say, preview of the future problems. But industrial production in July in Europe is down, as you can see, and the trend is actually getting worse. So it's accelerating, and this also means this is not just Germany; it's across the board in Europe. The situation is definitely negative. Also supported by numbers from Italy, as you can see. It's very similar to the sort of European number, and also very sharp acceleration in the negative direction. Although inflation in Italy does look a little bit is getting under control, especially if you compare with June and previous numbers. Is very clearly it's receding, but it's far from anywhere close to where it needs to be. So now let's switch to the U.S. situation. In the U.S. is different. As you can see, job market is still strong in the U.S. It remains sort of so far strong. There were some initial cracks, but they were sort of were not supported by the new data that came out. The also This is actually first time I want to mention that there might be a change in the manufacturing situation in the U.S. The capacity utilization went up, and also industrial production actually went marginally but up, as you can see. But this clearly positive trend. I don't know if it's sustainable. It's just the initial sort of first data point that points in the positive direction. So I don't know if it's sustainable, but there's clearly change in a trend from negative to positive in the US. Let's look in Germany. The situation is simply horrific in Germany. And I don't know, but this Germany is on a collision course of some kind of epic proportions. I don't know, some potentially very um, basically social unrest and political upheaval of humongous proportions, basically. So the ZAW, just some German institution that does this polls, and current conditions is, as I say, it's current conditions, economic conditions, and it's nearly negative 80. Just a comparison, in the depths of the crisis 2008, I think the lowest was minus 93, and this 80 was also close to the depth of the crisis. Similar was in 2020, and you can see it's a sharp drop from 71 to 79. So it's really accelerating and very quickly. Situation in Germany is, I would say, extremely explosive. And then sentiment, which is future expectations. So as you can see, they actually a little bit improved here, the expectations, and I would say it on the surface it may look sort of positive that expectations are getting better, But actually, if you really think, it really means that people still psychologically don't realize how bad things are gonna get, and which also means that they're gonna get much worse. So we'll see if that logic is correct. But this, I would say, if you believe that logic, this consistently show that things were gonna get actually worse from here in Germany. But and you can sort of fundamentally can sort of assume the same, just because if you really think, nothing changes in Germany. Basically, the same policy um, continues: economic policy, energy policy, everything. So this ensures essentially destruction of the German economy. Now let's switch to China. So what's going on in China is there's this total social financing. Basically, it's all sorts of debt, or actually, it's actually even debt and equity, I believe, including governmental. So basically, what this really means: the government pump tons of debt and all sort of financing, of, we'll call it printing money, into the economy, basically issuing all sorts of unbacked credit into the economy in attempt to boost economic development, economic growth, which is backwards. And the only reason it worked because the Chinese export-oriented model worked, and China was manufacturing hub of the world, and companies from around the world were bringing their manufacturing to China. So this approach worked because it was masked by that actual productive investments. Because total social financing is essentially completely unproductive. Most of it is completely unproductive investment, basically waste of capital. And as I said, this was in the past was sort of, I would say, outweighed by positive investments into actually productive manufacturing assets. And now this, as I said, is being just there's attempt to sort of repeat the same, but the condition changed, and it actually aggravates the problem, makes things actually much worse. And if you look at the fixed asset investment, basically it's a investment in manufacturing capacity, basically in the future ability to produce. It's dropping, and if you look at the previous numbers, it's just very straight sort of trend, a negative trend. So the previous one was 3.8. So now it's then it's 3.4. Now it's 3.2. So it's very clear downward trend, and I would say pretty quick downward trend, and it's obviously driven by evasion of China by foreign capital. So like whatever international companies, they're not moving any more production to China, and they probably moving out of it. The only thing that was sort of, well, not the only thing, but there are also positive signs in China. So industrial production jumped up, as you can see. Again, it's unclear if this is this unproductive debt that's driving this. So in that case, this is just delusion, effectively. And then retail sales also went up. Also, unemployment went down, as you can see. So there is a bunch of sort of positive trends, but on the surface, whether it's sort of truly positive in its nature, that's another question. Don't speak Chinese, so cannot really give perspective from like if it's truly valid or just sort of false positive. Also, the FDI, basically foreign direct investments for August year to date, so basically first 8 months is year on year, then they are negative, which is consistent with fixed asset investment, right? So, and the trend is also accelerating. So the basically international capital is leaving China. So, in other words, what's really happening is foreign manufacturing is definitely shrinking and not growing anymore in China. It goes elsewhere. and the Chinese government is trying to sort of compensate that by all of this unproductive debt issuance and trying to basically boost the economy by this unproductive debt, which will backfire. It's not going to happen immediately, but eventually it's going to be an epic negative result. So now let's switch to um, other countries in Asia and then also UK. So looking at Korea, things are a little bit more stabilizing. The export and import prices are still going down, but at slower pace. Also, sign that things are stabilizing, actually maybe improving, is the unemployment rate. As you can see, is it's extremely low. It's essentially the country is look based on just this looks like at full capacity. Like capacity utilization has to be insane. The only question is the prices, which is, and then export still is imported also going down. So, given that South Korean economy is export oriented, this so far is interesting because things are still going negative, except at a slower pace. But employment is really actually going up, and then sorry, apologies, should be green here. I forgot to change the color. Now let's switch to the UK. Things in the UK in terms of employment are clearly going in a negative direction, and the trend here is very clear. And that's probably the sort of leader around the world in a clear negative trend in the labor market. Uh, I think, like for example, in May was 3.8. Now it's July. This is July number. It's not July, but it's a July number. It's extremely delayed for some reason in the UK. So you see it's 4.3. So it's very clear, zero point 0.5 up, and that's quite a bit over a short period of time. Let's say 3 months. That's a lot. So the job market in the UK is unraveling in pretty quickly. At the same time, industrial production and manufacturing, which manufacturing is part of industrial production, is clearly up. So we'll see how it all plays out. But so far, the this bump in manufacturing and industrial production is not corroborated by rising unemployment there. And then if we switch to Japan, uh, one thing is clear that machine tool orders are down, which is very important for Japan because this is export-oriented economy, and they focus on the capital goods, which means machines to produce, consumer goods. Essentially, that's their specialty. Plus, obviously, auto manufacturing. And then, however, so first, machine tool orders seems to be the slowdown seems to be abating, at least the speed declining. Then core machinery orders in July is actually was a little bit up. So pictures kind of here muddy and somewhat inconsistent. So we'll see what happens in the coming months. I just would like to show also what's going on in the U.S. in terms of financing U.S. debt by by other countries around the world. First, I would like to say is that on net, the foreigners are still willing to finance U.S. Governmental debt. As you can see, the number is going from 7.5 trillion from 7.4 in June of 2022 to 7.5. So that's very clear that the trend is still positive, is still willingness to finance. However, I would like to identify clearly countries that sort of some of them cannot, some of them are not willing. So, for example, very clear example is Japan, where the export-oriented model was broken so far, and they don't have positive, really not much of a positive trade balance. So, because just that forces Japan to basically sell off treasuries because they need to finance their own negative trade balance. Similar situation with China, probably also here some political influences as well, much more than anything. At the same time, you can see these countries, but this is mostly sort of financially driven investments in these cases by all of these green countries. And then if we look at, for example, Brazil is neutral. Germany is also neutral again because the trade surplus is not there to basically finance U.S. State deficits. And the other noticeable country is Saudi Arabia, which is here it's probably more political decision. And I would say very clearly political decision, and that's really also highlights that the West and U.S. Apparently losing Persian Gulf to China. The only difference, the only sort of is UAE, which you can see went up. At the same time, Kuwait is also reducing its exposure. So overall, there is still appetite to finance U.S. Governmental debt, but there's very clear cracks in the trend, maybe quickly reversing because the financing sort of from productive sources is clearly in reverse, and by that I mean Japan, China, because that's a result of these countries, making some products and selling, and the same goes for Saudi Arabia because it's a resource, and Kuwait and Germany as well, and Brazil. So most of the countries who do it through productively generate their surpluses, they are stopping financing U.S. governmental debt. Which the problem with the financing, let's say from like Luxembourg and Switzerland, that this is really just sort of financial sources. So basically, it's not backed by the production of goods or resources or materials, and so it can be very inflationary. This sources of financing, which again, if U.S., which probably guaranteed that the government will continue with the huge deficits, this picture, all this means is this. That it virtually guarantees high inflation in U.S. Because the productive sources of financing that deficits are effectively gone, and you have only, call it non-productive, just financial sources of financing that deficits, at least from from around the world. So this is on its face, it looks like okay, there is still appetite, but unfortunately, most of it is coming from non-productive sources, which will be inflationary if, well, not if, but when U.S. will continue issuing unbacked debt, governmental debt. Now let's switch closer to Ukraine. I want to discuss a few things about Russian economy a little bit. So also Russia is going into facing a lot of challenges in economy. First of all, there is a negative trade balance, and there is no way to sort of address it the way central bank is actually trying to address it, and I would say, which is very correct move. I'm not sure if will persist, but the head of central bank is actually, at least on the surface, stating very correct approach to it. She wants to address it through economic measures by basically having high interest rates in the economy, versus that she doesn't want to do sort of like do any administrative measures like prohibiting transfer of foreign currency outside of Russia and so on. So she tries to be as non-disruptive and helpful for the economy as possible, which is on the surface, if this works out that way, that's the right approach. and but again, that's a big question if she's going to be allowed to do what is right actually for Russian economy. Then Russia also facing shortages of labor, which is driven by the war effort, and so on. So again, this is sort of artificial shortage because most of that labor that's being utilized, it's not utilized for anything productive because production of military equipment is waste. It's not. There's nothing productive about it. It's destruction, virtual destruction of resources. And Russia also, their inflation in Russia is increasing, and then the shortages and the crisis, actually, I would at this point I would call it crisis, with diesel and gasoline availability on internal Russian market is going sort of continuing and growing and persisting. So things are getting worse uh, and on the verge of getting out of control, to the point that Russian government is planning to ban export of diesel and gasoline, at least temporarily. So we'll see what happens. But they they either will face like full blown real crisis with social unrest, or they will have to ban export of diesel and gasoline, which also will affect the world markets for the same, because that's one big, call it, bowl, while one big fuel tank, and if you remove it from a global market perspective, then the prices will become firmer everywhere in the West as well. Then a little bit like less economical news is there are rumors, and I don't know to what extent this is true. Um, Basically, circulating in Russian media that as a result of the visit of a North Korean president, Russia will get at least 10 million 152 and 122 millimeter shells, which is a really big number. This is um, equivalent what Soviet Union was producing during World War II per year. And equivalent, I mean that Soviet Union produced more, but that if you, but then many of them were like 76 millimeters and so on. But if you convert, that's a very big number. That really means that Russia might be able to do at this point offensive if it gets that those shells, and or simply continue the war, except don't feel any shortages, because right now um, uh, a lot of sort of successful advances of Ukrainian troops are partially due to the shortages of ammunition and artillery ammunition on the Russian side, which I mentioned before. There is very clear shortage. It's not like that Russian army doesn't have it all, but it's night and day to what it used to be last summer of 2022. Definitely, Ukraine has now upper hand relative to Russia. Then there is another update out of Russia, and this is actually very concerning, is then in St. Petersburg, there will be a test of global, citywide alert system. This is for in case of obviously war, and as you can imagine, St. Petersburg is far away from Ukraine, so this is could mean preparation for much bigger war and sort of big war that involves not obviously Ukraine. Something similar, by the way, is happening in the US, I think, in the beginning of October as well. So there's clearly signs of escalation on both sides, and Also, Russian Minister of Foreign Affairs was calling U.S. directly responsible for the war, and that Russia is sort of waging war with the U.S. So, just for those who have some ideas, thinking that this is war with Ukraine, it's completely Russia doesn't see that way. They see this war with the U.S. Now, also want to discuss a little bit um, situation in terms of troop morale on the front on both sides, and it's terrible on both sides. So, and more aggravating for the Russian side was recent announcement that there will be no like rotation of people who were basically called into army since the beginning of the war, like in February of 2022, and then in the fall of 2022. You know, they expect some kind of rotation with the hope that there will be new mobilization and they will be replaced by sort of newly mobilized soldiers. And the response is, no, you're staying until the very end of the war. So basically, it's very similar to how it used to be World War One. Not very, it's exactly how it was in World War One, World War Two, but basically you fighting till the very end, and what that also means that your chances of surviving are close to zero. This is then it becomes very clear to majority of the soldiers that there are two ways out. One is a hospital, another one into the ground, and it obviously depresses morale on the Russian side. And I'm speaking about the Russian side just because there was this announcement from, I think, a Russian politician in the Russian parliament stating that there will be no rotation. Situation on Ukrainian side is mirror the same, so there is no difference, and there will be no rotation either. And most soldiers understand that, so meaning that they realize it, and obviously the morale is depressed in the same way. So there's let's say boiling anger on in both armies against sort of their own governments, and I would say if I would compare it to the boiling point of water, 100 degrees Celsius, I would say it's somewhere between 85 to 90 degrees Celsius in both armies. So that's what's going on. And then also, so there were some news by the head of the mobilization for one of the regions in Ukraine, and to be specific, for Poltava region, which is a kind of like core Ukrainian region on the eastern bank of Dnipro River. And so there he was stating some numbers that were shocking internally to Ukraine, to population in Ukraine, where he said that out of 100 people who were mobilized, like let's say last fall, only 10 to 20 are still on the front line in their units, and the rest of them sort of gone for various reasons. And then there's this. Unfortunately, he didn't explain the whole detail, and that led to speculation that, let's say, this 80% are essentially dead, which is not correct. And the way it actually works is out of this 80%, about 20%. So let's say we take it at 100, right? 100 people, 20 people still on the front line, about 20 people dead, about 40 people wounded, and that could be from lightly wounded to severely wounded. Then roughly 10 people basically have some kind of diseases, because most people are, I would say, generally, population in the world is very unhealthy. I mentioned about this, metabolically compromised. Situation in Ukraine not as bad, let's say, as I would highlight like US, where this is horrific. I think 93% of population is metabolically compromised, and but still pretty bad. And the same in Russia, pretty bad. And but the point is, so you have that some all sort of diseases, and people are not all young, a lot of like 30, 40, 50 years old. So you have that nature of sort of attrition for like natural diseases situation, and then another 10 about prisoners of war. So again, this doesn't mean that like all 80 people dead, but from effectiveness, from who you have on the ground, or the boots on the ground, yeah, 80% is wiped out, and that's why there is this ongoing mobilization, and there is a problem with mobilization, and this is that's why I'm saying that strategically this is dead end for Ukraine if it continues to basically waste resources the way Ukrainian command and Ukrainian political top is doing. This is a road to nowhere, to actually to be to lose Ukrainian independence in the long run, because despite this sort of delusional thinking in parts of the West that Russia will just be happy to get this acquired territories as absolutely captured territories, let's say. That's totally not true. Russia will continue until it chews up all of Ukraine, because it really needs all of Ukraine. So it's on a mission to basically capture all of the Ukraine, and that's why you heard all of those ramblings to warn Poland from basically invading Western Ukraine to salvage whatever is left, so that Russia can capture all of the entirety of Ukraine. So this is that's the this point. This is what how it kind of like tells you to where the sinking of the Russian political top. They not even they basically 100% convinced that things are going per their plan, and they are on the path to capture all of Ukraine. And I just want to make sure that somehow Poland doesn't get sort of involved, and which may lead in that case to direct confrontation with the NATO. So they kind of like sending warning signals to Poland to stay away from all of this. So that's update on military situation in sort of around Ukraine. Also, want to mention that another sign that things are going into escalation is the news that that the salary for the U.S. military personnel will be hiked by the record number, basically the largest number in the entire history, to attract more people into the U.S. military. That's obviously, as you can imagine, does not happen when things are fine and things sort of peaceful. This really clear sign of expectation of potential escalation. Obviously, that really means more escalation with China. Now I'm gonna walk through the front line in a clockwise fashion, as I always do, starting with the north, and the situation along the state border remains stable, the same, no essential sort of developments there. Situation along the situation on the North Luhansk front line is also quiet, just tactical skirmishes, nothing of even sort of worth like mentioning or notable at all. Now let's move to the North Donbass front line. Things here in the northern sector are quiet. However, there are developments in their southern sector. As I mentioned before, Ukrainian forces managed to regain, basically liberate some territories. But what turns out is this was not sort of primitive squeeze and futile squeeze as I saw it initially. So right, news emerges, and it looks like this 72nd Brigade was severely uh, damaged in the process. Basically, they have heavy losses. So, based obviously on the Ukrainian information, the three battalion commanders were killed in action. Basically, this unit is probably not capable of any operation, even limited defensive operation at this point. And what it looks like that this 31st Airborne Brigade was pulled from northern sector into the southern to plug the hole left by the 70s. Essentially, I wouldn't say annihilated completely, but basically you still have some structure, but basically you don't have any battle capability in that brigade. And so the hole was plugged by 31st Airborne Brigade, and it looks like the things are not going well for the 31st Brigade either. And the commander of that brigade was just killed in action as well here, somewhere around Klishivka area. So it does look that there are initial signs that there is a crisis developing for the Russian side in this Klishivka to Kurdyumivka area, where potentially Ukrainian army can create a decisive, basically breach in the Russian defenses and get into the uh, operational area where they actually can truly sort of make like true offensive, where it's not a squeeze but quick move that collapses Russian defenses. I'm not saying it's happening, but I would say there is a chance of that. So we'll see what happens. But things seems to be not going well for the Russian side at all here. Um, Now let's move to the central Donbass front line. Since here are sort of traditional Russian attacks around Avdiivka salient, and then also Russian attacks towards Marinka without any success. Now let's move to the Zaporizhia front line. Things here are somewhat quieter. Looks like Ukrainian command is regrouping, rethinking maybe. And I also want to mention about the nature of the warfare and how it changed and the role of different uh, equipment in this warfare. So effectively, I would say the only components that's still working and actually delivering actual results is artillery and mortar fire. Obviously, basically that part, and actual soldiers, and tactical UAVs. That basically that you have this triangle: tactical UAV, artillery, and the soldier. Basically, tactical UAV is your reconnaissance that helps to suppress opposing side with the artillery fire, and then there are soldiers who go and do storming opposing defensive lines. And so there is only these three pieces, and effectively what's happening is tanks are useless, IFVs are useless, the attack helicopters are useless, and also airplanes are useless. So they are there, but the effectiveness of their actions are close to zero. Let's put it this way. And giving the cost of them, the net result, they are extremely negative. Like from a sort of financial perspective, it's a huge negative result. Um, what is other part that's truly missing is assault guns for both sides, similar to what Germany had in World War II, to support attacking infantry. That is totally missing on both sides. Russia has tried to address that by using T-55 and T-62 as sort of improvised assault guns, but they're useless in that role. due to the caliber of their gun and so on. So they tried, but it doesn't work. So that's a big hole in both armies, and that would sort of would can create decisive advantage on the battlefield, tactical advantage on the battlefield, and sort of help with storming this trench lines, and all of those red holes, and all of that. That's essentially, it's kind of like, I would say, World War One in many respects, where there's strategic balance and there's the need for sort of different. So, well, it's not new type of weapon because assault guns and not nothing new, but essentially that could tilt the scale in one versus another side in this war. Now let's move to the last section of the front line, which is along the Dnipro River. And things here are quiet for now. We'll see what happens, but neither side is up for any active action. That's all for today. Thanks for watching. Until next time. Bye bye.